There is something you may have felt but never knew how to name, an invisible presence that happens when you touch someone. And it's not just skin, not just gesture, not just proximity. It's as if something passes through you, like an ancient breath traversing time, invading the now. You touch, and he changes, not outwardly, but inwardly. And perhaps you never understood why that simple touch moved him so much, or you. If this kind of reflection truly moves you, perhaps this is your place. Consider subscribing to the channel. Jung said that the symbol is the language of the soul, and the soul, when it speaks, does not shout. It whispers, in dreams, in silences, in shivers. That is why certain touches, certain presences, certain absences affect us in a way we do not always understand, because they are not physical events. They are psychic activations. They are memories of something we may not even have lived, but feel as if it were our own. The body, that temple so sensitive, so intuitive, is a map, and each part of it holds meanings that go far beyond biology. The nape, the chest, the hands, the ears, the back are not merely anatomical regions. They are portals, they are symbols, they are direct passages to someone's soul, especially that of a man who learned to hide his true desire behind the armor of control. Have you noticed how some men only relax when you touch them in certain places, as if that deactivated an invisible struggle, as if his body said, "Now I can rest"? It's not about seduction. It's not about technique. It's about symbolic truth, about accessing in him not the carnal impulse, but the desire to be seen, the desire to be held, the desire to return home within himself. Masculine desire, despite so often being reduced to image, arousal, or conquest, actually springs from the soul, from ancestral memory, from what the unconscious recognizes as safe, mysterious, feminine, and enchanting. When you truly touch, it's not his body that trembles. It's his emotional history that shifts. Something within him remembers and surrenders. Jordan Peterson, in his symbolic view, points out that woman, as creative chaos, activates in man a deep impulse toward order and transcendence. That means that, faced with a woman who knows who she is, who touches with soul, who doesn't need to shout, the man, even without understanding, feels that something greater is happening. And if he is ready, he gives in. Not to her, but to what she represents. This video is not about manipulating desires. It's about honoring the depth of the feminine and its ancestral capacity to awaken truths in the masculine. You don't need to learn how to seduce a man. You need to remember how to touch a soul. And you already know how, even if you have forgotten. Because every woman carries within her the archetype of the healer, the priestess, the initiator, the one who, with a gentle gesture, can open what logic has locked, and with a calm look, can undo years of emotional silence. Every part of the male body holds secrets, and when you touch them with presence, intention, and symbolic truth, you not only awaken desire, you awaken the soul. If this resonated with you in any way, leave a like. It shows these conversations are necessary. In the next few minutes, we will walk through these symbolic portals of the male body. We will touch with words, places you may already have touched without realizing. We will remember together the power you carry, not as technique but as presence. Because the deepest desire is not born from what is seen, it is born from what is felt. And you, woman, feel too much. You feel so much that sometimes you even hide from it. But today, not today. Today, we will awaken. Not to catch someone's attention, but to recognize that your touch is a moving soul, and that no one forgets. Are you ready to continue? Then let us go together. A man's nape is sacred territory. Few notice, but there, at that silent point between, the mind of the head and the strength of the shoulders, dwells a profound symbol of vulnerability. The nape does not shout, it yields, it bows, and it is precisely in that act of yielding that the male soul, so trained to resist, begins to relax. He spends his life raising walls. He learned early that he must protect, lead, endure, that he cannot show fragility, much less surrender. But when someone touches his nape with true presence, something changes. Not because the touch is technical, sensual or calculated, but because that touch speaks to a part of him he himself forgot. The nape carries the symbol of emotional surrender and, psychologically, represents the passage between rational thought and the most primitive instincts. It's as if by touching it you silently say, "Here, you can stop fighting." It's a gesture that dissolves armor without needing to break it, that invites without invading, that soothes without demanding explanations. In the masculine unconscious, that touch rescues the memory of first affection. When he was a baby, fragile and surrendered, it was on the nape that he felt the warmth of his mother's embrace, the security of her hug, her scent, and even if he doesn't remember it rationally, his body remembers, his soul remembers, and desire then ceases to be a conquest impulse and becomes a movement of trust. When a woman touches a man's nape with symbolic truth, she is not seducing. She is silently saying, "You don't have to fight me." It is the opposite of confrontation. It is the opposite of games. It is refuge. It is the feminine saying, "I do not want to defeat you. I want to welcome what lies beyond what you show." He may not understand immediately. He may even pull away, frightened by an intensity he doesn't know how to name, but something within him moves, and perhaps for the first time in a long time, he feels that he can breathe, that he can let down his guard, that he can exist whole, without fear of being devoured. And that is rare, because many men have never experienced that kind of surrender. They were taught that love demands effort, struggle, performance, and when they feel something that disarms them, the ego, still clinging to survival, may resist. But the soul has already opened, and it does not go back. That touch transforms war into rest, transforms shield into skin, transforms defense into presence, because it is a touch that wants nothing in return. It only wants to say, "I see you," even when you pretend to be strong. And if you have ever touched someone like that, perhaps you also felt the weight he carries. Perhaps your hands trembled before the unspoken pain that lived there. Perhaps you felt that, behind the secure appearance, there was a tired boy asking for a little peace. And that is why true desire begins in that place, because there is no deeper desire than to be accepted in one's own weakness. And there is no more powerful invitation than a touch that says, "You can rest in me for an instant. I will not demand your strength." If you have ever experienced something like that, if you recognize that silent surrender in a look or a gesture or an absence, then you already know. You know the power you have. You know how much your presence heals. If something inside you opened with this video, write in the comments. Sometimes sharing also heals. And if you want to continue on this soul journey, we are here, whenever you want to return. Hands speak, long before words, long before gazes. Hands say what the heart has not yet had the courage to reveal. They tremble when they feel truth. They hold firm when there is surrender. They release when fear is greater than love. And on a man's body, hands are not just tools for doing. They are bridges of identity. The masculine has always been taught to build, to sustain, to offer. Therefore, a man's hands carry more than veins, bones, and muscles. They carry symbols, memories, affective functions. They carry the "I can," the "I am capable," the "I can take care." When you touch a man's hands with presence and truth, something happens, not in the touch itself, but in what it represents. Because in that gesture, you are not merely placing your hand on his skin, you are silently saying, "I see your strength and I do not want to take it, I just want to feel it." Touching the hands is touching active identity. It is saying, "I accept what you have to offer," not as a demand, not as a test, but as a silent pact of presence, as an ancestral ritual that says, "I do not demand, I receive, I acknowledge your gesture." And that changes everything, because many men have been hurt by demands, by relationships in which their actions were never enough, where their doing was neither seen nor valued. And when suddenly a woman touches their hands with tenderness and respect, the unconscious understands that there is no demand there. There is space. There is acceptance. That is why this touch awakens a rare kind of desire, a desire that does not seek the body, that does not seek immediate pleasure, but that seeks permanence, seeks reciprocity, seeks to be needed without being suffocated, desire to be present, to belong, to be seen. When you hold a man's hands without expecting him to act, decide, or lead, you give him the chance to simply be. And this kind of freedom, to be desired even when doing nothing, is a revolutionary experience for the male soul. The woman who touches a man's hands as one touches an altar symbolically says, "You have me even without possessing me." And that is one of the most powerful phrases a man can hear without hearing, because it crosses the ego and reaches directly the archetype of the companion, the protector, the guardian. Perhaps that is why so many women feel that by taking a man's hand, something connects in a mysterious way. Perhaps it is the soul's memory recognizing the soul. Perhaps it is the body speaking the language of ancestry. Perhaps it is the heart saying, "Here now I am with you." And even if he does not understand, even if he resists, even if he withdraws his hands afterward, the gesture has already been made, and the psyche has already been touched. Because where there is truth, there is a mark, and where there is symbol, there is memory. If you have ever felt that, if by touching someone's hands you sensed that there was an invisible bond there, beyond logic, yet as real as your own breath, then you understand. You understand what that touch awakens, not in the body but in the soul. If that made sense to you, if something vibrated inside, leave a like. It shows these conversations deserve to stay alive. There is something sacred in the silence that precedes a whisper. It is as if, for an instant, time stops to listen to what cannot be said out loud. The ears, beyond their biological function, are portals of emotional listening. And when you approach that region, especially in a man who carries so much inner noise, you are saying, "I see your shadow and I do not fear it." The male ear is one of the most vulnerable points on the body, because it is not protected by muscles. It does not defend itself with strength. It simply receives. And that for many men is frightening. To be receptive, to feel, to listen, without filter, without control, activates parts they have learned to silence. When a woman leans close to a man's ear and touches it with gentle words or with a light gesture, something symbolic happens. She invokes the archetypal enchantress, the one who does not impose but guides, the one who does not command but leads, the one who speaks to the soul, not the mind. This touch is not about obvious seduction. It is about revealing the hidden narrative of the masculine. When he hears a truth spoken softly but profoundly, he not only hears you, he hears himself. He hears his ancient pain, his stifled insecurities, his swallowed doubts. He hears the echo of the boy who was never allowed to cry. And desire then changes frequency. It ceases to be physical, direct, pulsating. It becomes enchantment, because there is no greater enchantment than being heard in full, without judgment. And that is what the touch on the ear proposes, a space where the masculine can finally listen to himself from within. Many men fear this kind of listening, because they know that there lie truths they do not want to face. Truths about their wounds, their failures, their sensitivity. But when you touch that point with true presence, even if he runs away, even if he pretends not to have felt, he did feel, because whispered words at the ear do not die. They dwell. They resonate days later, weeks later, in moments of solitude, in the silences that surround him, in the absence he cannot name. And it is there, in the space between what was said and what was felt, that desire transforms into bond. The touch on the ear is a pact with the invisible. It is an alliance with the part of him he shows to no one. And perhaps that is why when a woman speaks softly but with soul, she breaks defenses that no shout could shatter. It is in this place that true intimacy is born, not the one that depends on naked bodies, but the one built with whispered truths. The intimacy that does not demand, does not pressure, does not dramatize. It simply reveals. It simply exists. And if you have ever spoken to someone like that, near the ear, calmly, truthfully, with soul, you know that even if he never replied, something was heard, something was awakened, something in him recognized in you, a voice he needed but never knew how to ask for. This is the power of symbolic touch. It does not need rational permission. It enters where the ego cannot prevent it, and once inside, it transforms. If something inside you opened with this video, write in the comments. Sometimes sharing also heals, and if you want to continue on this soul journey, we are here whenever you want to return. There is a place on the male body where almost no one dares to truly touch, a space where he hides what he cannot name. The chest, that apparent center of strength, protection, courage, is also where fear resides. Pain, absence, the wound, what he would never confess aloud, but that pulses silently every day. When you touch a man's chest with truth, you are not merely touching the surface, you are accessing the symbolic center of what he learned to hide. The chest is where the wounded boy still resides, the boy who learned to keep silent, who was never embraced, who heard more demands than comfort, who felt but was not heard, who cried but no one noticed. And even if he has grown, even if he now has broad shoulders, a firm posture, a deep voice, inside the same boy still pulses, the one who wanted a lap but learned to offer his body, who wanted to be heard but learned to scream inwardly, who wanted to be loved but learned to seduce so as not to be forgotten. The touch on the chest, when done with presence and not haste, reveals that boy, and that scares, because the male ego does not want to be seen in that place. It prides itself on its armor, on its silence, on its independence. But the body gives away, the body knows, and when you press there with symbolic delicacy, it feels that something breaks, and perhaps, for the first time, it feels relief. It is not relief of desire, it is relief of being seen, of not having to sustain everything all the time, of being able for an instant to let someone touch him, not for what he offers but for who he is, a man full of absences, trying to appear whole. This touch does not offer sex, it offers solace, and that is more powerful than any promise of pleasure, because what most men lack is not stimulation, it is containment, it is soul, it is the gesture that says, I see your pain, and I don't need you to hide it from me. The woman who touches a man's chest with that subtle intention is not asking for anything. She is merely offering presence, and that changes everything, because the masculine, accustomed to being an object of desire or demand, does not know how to handle affection that does not require performance. The desire that springs from this point is profound, and therefore often rejected, because where there is depth, there is risk, and the wounded masculine fears drowning, fears not being able to cope, fears surrendering and not knowing how to return. But even when he retreats, even when he pretends not to have felt, his body has already responded. The unconscious has already stored that memory. Perhaps he will not speak of it. Perhaps he will disappear afterward. Perhaps he will say he is not ready. But he will never be the same. Because a true touch is not forgotten. It remains, it inhabits, it transforms. And if you have felt that, if you have ever touched someone and felt the weight of what he never told, if you realized that there in that silence existed a pain he didn't know how to carry, then you know that this gesture, as simple as it may seem, is a disguised cure. And perhaps that is why, so often, you are the one who cries afterward. Because by touching his chest you felt the lack he feels, but does not express. And that also reminds you of your own lack, of what you also wanted to receive, of what you also learned to hide. You touched, and for an instant, you were the lap he never had. Even if he never said so, even if he never returns, you were the mirror of his soul, and that ain't no other will ever replicate. If that made you think of someone, or of yourself in a moment like that, perhaps another woman needs to hear this too. Share with soul. A man's back is silent territory, and perhaps that is why almost no one listens to it attentively. But whoever learns to touch it with truth begins to decipher what the body screams when the mouth falls silent. The back does not ask. It does not beg, it simply carries. And it carries more than muscles. It carries the weight of the world, of expectation, of the role, of the obligation to always be strong. There, where he cannot reach with his own hands, live parts of him he does not know how to see. Wounds he never named. Emotional illnesses never treated. Guilt no one forgave. The back is where he hides what he cannot show. And therefore, touching it is a gesture of profound intimacy. The woman who touches a man's back with sensitivity and presence is saying without words, I feel what you hide. And not with judgment, but with compassion, because this touch does not invade, it supports, it upholds. It offers what the whole world always seems to take away from him, a space where he can be human. The masculine, so accustomed to offering support, rarely acknowledges the desire to be supported. And when that desire appears, it comes disguised. In weariness, he denies. In silences too long. In looks lost into emptiness. And often, in anger that explodes without reason, because the weight he carries is greater than the strength he has, yet he doesn't know how to let go. And then, when someone places her hands on his back, as if saying, "You can rest a little," something breaks. The rigidity yields, the armor softens, and inside, he allows himself, even if for a second, to be cared for, to be seen, to be welcomed without having to do anything. This touch is powerful because it takes nothing from him. It does not steal his autonomy. On the contrary, it restores it. It restores to him the right to be vulnerable, to feel pain, to tire, to not know. And that, to the masculine unconscious, is revolutionary. The back is, symbolically, the territory of the repressed unconscious, of the shadow he does not look at, of the emotion he does not understand. And when a woman touches that place, she is, in a way, saying, "I feel what you pretend not to feel." And only one who loves deeply is capable of touching that pain. Without fear. Often that touch is not reciprocated. He does not react, he does not thank, he does not understand. But his body understands, his nervous system understands, his unconscious understands. And from that moment on, something within him carries the memory of having been supported, even if only for moments, even if he never says a word. The desire that is born on the back is not the desire for arousal. It is the desire for rest, for trust, for surrender without demand, the desire to be seen beyond performance, to be loved without having to sustain the world, to be for the first time simply himself, without roles, without masks, without goals. If you have ever touched someone like that, if you have felt the silent tremor of a man who, when touched on the back, allowed an inner tear to fall, then you have been a refuge, and that experience, even without words, remains. Because the body does not forget the gesture that relieved the burden. He may not have stayed, he may have left the next day, but you left in him something no one else will leave. You touched what he did not see. You supported what he did not say. You felt what he denied. And that is the kind of touch that echoes forever, even in silence. If something inside you opened with this video, write in the comments. Sometimes sharing also heals. And if you want to continue on this soul journey, we are here whenever you want to return. Carl Jung told us that symbols have more power than facts, because the symbol crosses the mind and settles in the soul. It speaks a language that needs no translation, demands no logic, that simply exists, silent and transformative. And when we speak of desire, that is what it's about. Of what is felt before being understood, of what touches before being named. It is not the perfect body that awakens a man's profound desire. It is symbolic presence. It is the energy that arrives before the word. It is the gesture that, without intention of conquest, heals. The woman who knows how to touch beyond the skin is not concerned with being chosen. She knows that by touching with soul, she has already left a mark, and certain marks do not heal because they do not hurt, they transform. Clarissa Pinkola Estes reminds us of the wild woman, the one who touches with soul and therefore frightens, because she heals, because she reveals, because she shows a man not who she is, but who he did not yet know within himself, and that not everyone is ready to receive. By touching a man's forgotten parts, not with technique but with presence, you become a mirror. You do not seduce. You reveal. You reveal the shadow, the fear, the boy, the weary warrior, the man who still seeks something he cannot define. And by touching that place with love and without attachment, you become unforgettable. Because true desire is not physical, it is psychic. It is the memory of having been seen where no one saw, of having been felt where there was only silence, of having been touched where no one dared to go. And that, time does not erase. You woman who feel so deeply, who have always carried the gift of intuitive presence, perhaps you have forgotten how rare you are, how much your touch carries ancestral memories, how much your body is a bridge between worlds, between the visible and the invisible, between instinct and soul, between pain and healing. And even if life has made you doubt that, even if some men have walked away after feeling your intensity, it was not because you were too much. It was because you touched where they were not ready to remain. And that is not your fault. It is your wisdom. The woman who touches a man's soul does not become a necessity. She becomes initiation. And a man's spiritual journey begins when he finds a woman who, without realizing it, ignited in him a light he did not even know he carried. If this truth resonated with you, write in the comments, "I am the woman who touches the soul before the skin." Let that be your rite of affirmation. And if you want to continue on this soul journey, we are here whenever you want to return.